First story. I don't know if it fits into that sense of horror, half ghost, of something bad, but I was a little wary. Anyway, a few years ago a guy stopped me on the street, in the middle of a crowd, pulled me aside and said, "Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to let you know that Jesus loves you." Obviously, I was confused and asked him to repeat what he said, and he said the same thing, but then he walked off into the crowd and simply disappeared, even though I tried to follow him. Coincidence or not, in the following days I started seeing beggars everywhere I went, and they were always different. They weren't the ones that keep their place and you recognize them because you pass by there often. Work, college, home, it got to the point that one day I dozed off on the bus and got off on an avenue about 15 minutes from home, and to my surprise, the first thing I saw was a beggar, who looked at me and said, "Could you spare 25 cents, please?" I rummaged through my pockets and guess what? Exactly 25 cents there. I walked down the street and what's on the corner sleeping? That's right. The day after the 25 cents, I was on the bus going home, around 11 p.m., when a guy got on with those cotton candy sticks, with holes to put the cotton in and sell. I hadn't seen one of those in, I don't know, 10 years, especially at this time. Incidentally, he got on at a stop that's in front of a church, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen someone use it. The guy got on and, out of all the free seats, sat next to me and started a conversation, and he was a rascal. That's when the guy went crazy. He told some stories about himself, some anecdotes, and everything kind of sounded related to my life, as if they were allegories for things I felt/experienced. It's also weird that he was always in a very different condition in each story. One moment he was a successful suit-wearing man, the next he was a humble manual laborer, as if they were different lives. Second story. When I was a child, I used to visit an elderly couple's house to play with their ducks and turtles. It was at the end of my street. They always left the gate unlocked, and I was allowed to go straight to the back to play with the aforementioned animals. One cloudy afternoon, I went there, as I always did, and came across the old man hanging from the tree by his neck. I ran back home screaming. Later, I found out that the old woman had killed herself by taking medication. In my childhood mind, where the world was perfect, no one killed themselves, and my mother, afraid that I would develop a certain social phobia, that I would be afraid of people killing me, told me the truth. That penetrated my mind so strongly that even today, in the dark and fog, if I focus too much on a certain point, let my mind wander, even if I'm not thinking about anything, I can see a figure hanging. Third story. I spent my childhood on a farm, and something interesting about rural dwellers, especially in the pre-electricity era, which was my case, is the way they deal with the supernatural. The general idea is not to despair and pretend not to have seen it. A certain conscious blindness, so as not to despair too much. In my childhood I saw some interesting things that I don't really like to talk about, but one that I found most interesting was the neighbor's dog. A neighbor had a huge, black, hairy dog. It looked like a wolf, and since the people were indigenous, his name was Lobo, but he was a total Mongolian, loved to play and was very patient with us. He was free, he roamed all over the neighbors' farms, and was welcome everywhere. One time, I got home from school and my parents had gone out. They left a note for me to stay at a friend's farm, that they would come by to pick me up when they got back. The dog was there, and we played with him until nightfall. Dusk in the countryside, with no moon and no electricity, is pitch black, so we stayed in the house, by the light of a lamp, while my friend's mother prepared dinner. I don't remember exactly who noticed it first, but we saw the neighbor's dog emerging from a nearby bamboo grove in the light of the lamp. I remember how scared I was, because he looked different. Remembering that it was dark and he was black, you couldn't see him clearly, but he seemed bigger, and with an unnatural shape, as if his back paws were bigger than his front ones, making him look a little hunched over. He approached very slowly, and in fear my friend called out to his mother, "The wolf is coming at us," to which his mother replied, "Get in the house now." We ran inside and she locked the door. The wolf was in a corner of the house, huddled up and crying. Fourth story. I once visited a town in the countryside, really rural, and they told the story of a sinister light that would come on in the middle of the woods. They even had a name for this light, but I can't remember it now. They didn't tell the story just once, it was something that every local had on the tip of their tongue. At first I thought they were trying to scare the tourists, but it was really strange to see everyone telling the same story in so many details. According to them, the light was so intriguing that many people had gone into the woods to look for its source, but every time someone did, the light would go out. And it never appeared in the same place. Okay, right. Some time passed and I almost forgot about the story. I was enjoying the trip. The other day, coming back from a party in the early hours of the morning, I fell off my motorcycle. The road was dirt, it had rained earlier, mud everywhere. I hit the ground hard, I was a little disoriented, but when I got up, I saw, about 50 meters in front of me, in the middle of nowhere, a light in the woods. Man, imagine a deserted dirt road, there were no houses nearby. Dense woods. There was nothing, all silence. And another thing, I was coming down that road and I didn't see any light, it appeared out of nowhere. It looked like a kind of lighthouse, circular and very strong, shining from the bottom up. My heart started racing. I got on the bike as fast as I could and got the hell out of there like there was no tomorrow. Further ahead I looked back and everything was dark again. Fifth story. I once heard a story from a friend I made in Chile about a hospital complex in the basement of which there was an operating area that was next to an old sanatorium that was now closed. A group of medical students went to do an activity in this underground wing, but one of the members was late and the group decided to wait for her. When she arrived, she was very pale, unwell, and very upset. The student then said that she had actually been a little late and didn't know the way to the place where the group was going to do the activity. Because she didn't know the way, she opened a door and accidentally walked into a room. This room was huge and had the lights on, and inside there were people in white coats looking at her. One of these people told her that they were waiting for her. She thought it was strange, closed the door and kept walking until she stopped to ask for directions. It was when she asked for information that she was told that that door gave access to the wing of the deactivated sanatorium that had been closed for a long time and it was impossible for her to have seen anyone there because no one worked there. Sixth story. I think I've seen it all, except for the werewolf. My family has a long history of dealing with the supernatural, which some deny, in vain. Here is an incomplete list of situations that led me to choose this username. Shadow Man in my room, I prayed and he turned into black smoke and ran away. It was terrifying. I learned the power of prayer with faith. Years later, I woke up in the night and went into the living room. Two shadow men were teasing and provoking me. They seemed to be prevented from entering by a force field. I wasn't afraid, I felt sorry for them. They still seemed to be banned from the house. I woke up in the night and a well-dressed guy was doing something to my husband who was sleeping next to me. He left through a portal in the corner between the two walls of the room. Wow, man. My husband was sleepwalking that night. I wasn't afraid. I was warned in a dream that an accident would happen, but a team of mechanics from beyond were already making adjustments. The night it happened, my cat sat in front of the door and stared at me for a few minutes. I looked back and understood, it happened, I thought. The phone rang next, fuck, someone died. But the adjustments were precise. The car of the family member who had the accident passed between trees, posts and buildings, flipping sideways in the only way possible so that the cabin would not be affected. The car slid across the lawn until it stopped instead of suffering a head-on collision or having its roof flattened as it should have happened if it weren't for some ridiculous idiots who directed the car. A tray levitated twice. My husband and I witnessed it. During the day. WTF, man. We weren't scared. The radio was thrown off the table. During the day. My cousin and I witnessed it. WTF, man. There was a thrill, but I think I'm used to it now. Sighting of an unidentified flying object with atypical behavior. My husband and I saw it. I was traveling. I went to sleep and I was paralyzed. People entered the quartet. I heard the commotion of the group, the sound of wheels, metal objects being handled on a metal tray, a strong pressure on the back of my neck. Do what you have to do there and let me sleep, I said. I slept. In that same place, in some parts of the hotel, I tried to pray and I couldn't remember what the prayer was like. WTF. My husband saw a tall figure walking down the hallway in his relative's house, that one, crouching down so as not to hit the ceiling. He said it reminded him a bit of Renu from Death Note, but with a disproportionately large head and more like a skull.